recorded all of this stuff really good, right? So we've been talking about flow. I'm just going to repeat some of this so it's there for people who weren't able to join us tonight. The hello question had to do with, examples of being in the flow or words that would describe it. And then as examples, we had being at the potter's wheel, playing a serious game of chess, or being absorbed into watching playoff game, the Knicks play, right? Um, while tripping and falling and completely into that experience, speaking on stage and moving as one with the audience, or skiing moguls, being in a canoe with the paddle and the movement of being in the canoe, downhill skiing, cooking a complex dish and being completely into it, interpreting and sort of like that's where your complete focus is. I think what was said was forgetting everything else, uh, and then playing in a quartet, um, uh, dancing and feeling completely into the dance, and then sex. And some of the words that described it were uh, the experience of no separation, of flying, enjoyable, um, effortless, a piece of cake, transformational, um, and what was it? Deeply expansive, deeply rooted. And then we were just talking about, and here's where I'm going to pin the video, right? I hope I got most of those. I know I forgot one or two. Um, we're talking about whether it's out of the body or if there's a better way to describe that. And I think the way you describe that, and I'm going to invite everybody to put yourself back on mute, if you would, right, which will save on the feedback thing. Uh, I think it's connected to that idea of being at one with what you're doing, like totally absorbed by it. And the way we normally are with our body, or the way we normally are with things that we do, it's as if we are watching ourselves try to do it. As if there was like a little Brian or inside of you, a little you inside of your head, and it's, the world is appearing on like a big TV screen in your mind, and here I am making myself say the things, and I'm like at the controls, speaking into the microphone, and then this puppet called Brian is actually doing it. And it's like we're watching ourselves do this thing. And it's sort of an optical illusion that our minds play on us, that we watch ourselves do what we do. But in these flow moments, that barrier between your awareness of what you're doing and the actual doing becomes more porous, more see through, more transparent. And I think maybe instead of out of the body, but I think the description was pointing at, actually completely into it in a way that feels very like it feels unusual because normally we have that division, right, of watching ourselves. And that's very useful in terms of the of stage 8 and what we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about stage 8 as getting into the flow. So that's why we're going through all of this. So just as a reminder, we begin each session, and this will be very familiar to you as you've been practicing for the last couple of weeks. We set our intention, and our intention is to, stages 1 through 4. The intention is like the part of it's like the windshield, right? And this is the road that you're driving on. This is what you want to keep doing. So you could say it's the threefold object, stages 1 through 4, you're staying connected to that. And then as you get into stage 5 and beyond, you're working with the subtle object, right? So in stages 1 through 4, you're intending to connect with this settled, aware presence that is focused and alert. And that produces a calm, awake state of mind. And then in stage 5, we begin to transition to what we've been calling the subtle object, something a little bit more, something deeper. Um, and we'll go through the instructions in just a minute. And then stages 5 through 9 increase that connection with the subtle object. So that's our intention. That's what we're trying to do. That's the road that we're trying to stay on. And whatever else comes up, we use the steering wheel of our attention to bring ourselves back to what we're trying to stay with. Right? So we set the intention, and then we call to mind the field of masters. And, this is very traditional in meditation circles that, you call to mind exemplars, examples of people who have done this before. And I like to say this as, many, many ordinary people that would look at our lives and go, you guys are so special. You have all these magical devices. Look, you can talk to each other across distances and see each other. And, you have it, so easy, and we have it so hard. We're just ordinary women and men who learned how to focus our attention. Right? And so whoever that would be to you, I imagine them in front of me. And they're like the sun shining on me and sharing their ability to actually do the practice. And the reason to do that is that imagining them sharing their ability so that you can meditate like them, you can meditate like a master, takes you beyond thinking, oh, I can't do this. And all the stories that you might tell yourself of why they're more special than you are, right? They're sort of in the space around you going, sure, you can do it. Just try it again, right? So setting the intention, calling to mind the field of masters, and then you set your posture. And then you begin. And in stage 1, so this is going to be very fast. In stage 1, you have the 3-pointed object. You're paying attention to the rising breath, the falling breath, and in between breaths, body. So the nice thing about the 3-pointed object, there's lots of ways to teach this. Some people just use one single pointed object, but the 3-pointed object gives you something to pay attention to all the time, right? And so, the task at stage 1 is to notice when you get distracted and steer back. So you're beginning to learn, oh, that's distraction, anything that's not focused on the 3-pointed object, right? And then I have the ability to come back. In stage 2, the gas pedal idea is introduced, that you can give more energy. And we've been using the metaphor of it's like your best friend or your lover walked into the room, or your beloved, whatever, right? And you give her or him or it your full attention. You notice what they're wearing, how they look, what they're holding, how they entered the room. Did they enter in a hurry? Did they enter sort of like relaxed? You notice a lot because you care. And so there's an intimacy of the energy that you give to the 3-pointed object. You begin to care. And stage 2, you're still working with rising breath, falling breath, and in between body. And sometimes you're there and sometimes you're not. When you're not, a little bit more gas, back to trying to connect. So stage 2 is called partial staying. In stage 3, the attempt with more energy, closer to the object, more intimacy, you try to stay more completely. And so we go from the 3-pointed object, it unfolds and becomes the 7-pointed object. The beginning of the rising breath, the middle, at the end, the beginning of the falling breath, the middle, at the end, and then in between body. Right? Because there's more to pay attention to, it's easier to stay more of the time. Right? In stage 4, right, even more energy to your attention, trying to stay more completely with the object. It's from the very beginning of the in-breath all the way through. It's like you don't let go. It's not like, oh, I caught the beginning. Oh, yeah, there was the middle. Oh, yeah, I got the end. It's like, no, beginning, middle, end. You're there all through it. And then all the way through the falling breath, the breathing out, and in between body. Right? So you're continuously and completely present. What's happening is you've progressively trained your mind to stay with the object. And at stage 4, the idea of subtle dullness of mind, symbolized by the rabbit, was introduced. All right, so I'm going to share the screen so we can talk about this using the picture. Right? So we started at the very bottom, and if you count the elephants, they're the stages. So the elephant at the bottom is stage one. You're just trying to connect, right? And notice when you're distracted. The flames represent intensifying the energy or gas pedal. So the second elephant, the meditator is trying to get closer. The monkey of distraction is still dancing around, right? So more energy. We just talked about the seven-pointed object. That's the third elephant where the head is white, the monkey's head is white. There's this subtle rabbit, this rabbit that begins to appear. It wasn't here in stage two. You might begin to experience what the rabbit symbolizes, which is dullness of mind in stage three. And we were just talking about stage four. This is elephant number 4, counting from the bottom. The front half of the elephant is white. The front half of the rabbit's white. The monkey is approaching half white, right? This rabbit represents the quality of mind where, okay, you can now focus on an object. You can stay continuously and completely with the rising breath, the falling breath and body, but your mind begins to become, or can begin to become, a little dull and dreamy and sort of over relaxed. And so we introduce a wake up, right, to have presence while we're being focused. So there's a sense of continuous and awake presence, completely staying with the object, continuously and completely with the object, awake and present. And many times I think we've said, if you accomplish stage 4, that's brilliant. And if you want to stay at stage 4, that's a mind that is, I think that puts you in the top 1/100% of how most people hold their attention. Right? This is a brilliant place to stay. The path isn't done, right? But you could work with that for a long while. And then we took a break in our training and we worked with that. We were practicing stage 4, I think, for 6 weeks. And then we went to stage 5. And at stage 5, there was this video, and Tim, if I can send it to you, I'll send it to you, but it was a picture of driving down the road, and you're in the car, and trees and whatever are going by, and road signs, and you're just in the car. And the suggestion was that you could be aware that you were driving while you were driving. So you're completely, you know how to drive, you know how to stay on the road, your hands are on the wheel. Just because I'm going to ask you to relax a little bit, doesn't mean you drive off the road, right? So you're still driving down the road, you still have the gas pedal. In fact, you're going to give a little more energy. And we talked about it as driving and finding the perfect speed for the road. So there's no, speed sign that says 60 miles or 100 kilometers, that's the speed that you're supposed to go at, or that's the maximum speed. It's like you find the speed of complete and total engagement for you, when the road is a delight to drive. And this is where we began to open to what I'm going to call tonight the flow. That complete and total engagement begins to open a connection to flow. And then the relaxed quality is also important. So you're not strangling the wheel, right? So here we are at the 5th elephant. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The meditator's now in front, still has this rabbit on the back of the elephant, right? But the meditator is relaxed enough, it's like the meditator's now in charge. She or he is now in charge. They've got the steering wheel, they've got the perfect road speed that they're on, right? And then the suggestion was that if you lose that, because sometimes, and that's called we talked about the way to relax and open to that flow was to focus on knowing that you were meditating while you meditate. So, being self-aware. And, the weather check-in that we do in the morning of, what's your daily weather? How's it feel to be you? And we all give a weather report. It could be sunny. I think somebody today was like turmoil, right? Or, tornadoes brewing. And it was like, okay, that's your weather, right? We know what it feels like, right? That ability to know what it feels like to be you is connected to the ability to know what it feels like to meditate. And so that connects you to the subtle object, right? The knowing that you're meditating. And then that'll slip away and you reestablish it by going back to stage 4, continuous and complete engagement. And then stage 5, find the perfect speed again, total involvement, and then relax again into knowing while you're doing that. Stage 6 involves going back and forth a lot between that finding the subtle object, and then it'll fall apart. You'll lose your connection, and then you reestablish. And finding the subtle object and reestablishing, finding the subtle object, then it falls apart, and then you reestablish complete engagement, and you try again. And that back and forth between finding it and then having to find it again, and then having to find it again, that's the journey of stage 6. And every time you go back, you're trying to sustain it longer. And the process of sustaining the connection to the subtle object, actually the rabbit disappears. Because the dullness of mind and the subtle object, it's sort of like sunlight and shadow. When you find the subtle object, it's like the sun's come out. You're knowing. The rabbit represents not knowing, falling asleep, being dull-minded. And it's impossible to know and be dull-minded at the same time. So that's why the rabbit disappears. So that's what we did last week. And then we went around this corner, right? So now we were at the 7th elephant, right? We're getting close to the top of the path here, right? The 7th elephant, we talked about a stream. And my invitation to you during the week was to turn on the water at your home and let it get to whatever temperature. I don't like sticking my hand in cold water, so I let it run for a while until it gets pleasantly warm. And then my suggestion was stick your hand in and feel the difference between looking at the water and feeling the water. And then try to grab the stream, right? 2 things will happen, right? You can't grab the stream, right? It's a moving event. It's not a thing. It's not like a block of water, like I can pick up my pen and grab my pen. But a stream of water coming out of the faucet is not like the pen. It's constantly changing. It's more dynamic, right? The second thing is that the stream is an experience. So there is this quality of knowing, there is a continual experience happening. And for most of us, it's more than the short list I'm going to offer at the moment, but the stream of knowing includes your thoughts. So thoughts come and go, and your thoughts, and it's, the wonderful thing about this is it's already happening. So you don't have to make something new happen. You've been having thoughts as long as you've been alive. It's just you're actually seeing the stream, right? Recognizing its quality of stream, right? Or memories come and go. Earlier today, Margaret and I we had to go to Lunenburg, which is for those of you who don't live here, it's a lovely historic, heritage site town. And it's about 40 miles south of us. And it's a really nice drive. And it's maybe the 4th time I've been there in 3 months. And so I'm just remembering oh yeah, this road goes here and that comes next, and things pop into memory and then they leave. It's not really highly spiritual, Nobel laureate remembering. It's just ordinary remembering. So you could remember things from your deep past. You could remember things that happened yesterday. You could remember what's on your to-do list when you go home, right? So there's thinking, remembering, emotions. Emotions come and go. So you could feel happy, you could feel sad, could feel anywhere in between. And then it comes and then it goes. It has this streaming quality, right? And then physical sensations, right? So there's probably a lot more to that list, and I'm going to leave it at 4 of thinking, feeling, remembering, and sensing. And they are streaming by constantly as an experience, right? They are like the road that you're driving on. So I'm really mixing metaphors, and sometimes that makes this hard to follow. But, we've been talking about driving. The road is not just one thing, right? First, there's that tree going by, and then there's that sign, and then you've driven by another house, and there's another tree that looks like that first one. And, it has this moving quality, right? So part of why this particular program was called Entering the Stream was at this point, you're connecting to knowing and to the moving, alive quality of knowing. So that's taken us to stage 7. And here we are at stage 8. So the shifts between stage 1 and stage 2, or stage 2 and stage 3, they're big shifts. There's a lot of fire. You might notice on this picture, the fires have disappeared. First, they got smaller as you went from, the big fire between stages 4 and 5, smaller between big fire between stage 3 and 4, a smaller one between 4 and 5, and an even smaller one between 5 and 6, and no more fire. Right? So the process of intensifying and adding more energy, it's not like the energy goes away, right? We talked about stage 6 as cruise control. I forgot that. Right? You're just cruising along in this sustained connection, and now you've entered the stream, right? You don't need to be adding more energy, right? Very small changes of intention produce a big change in result. So it's the difference between driving a really heavy vehicle slowly, where you have to really turn on the wheel to get the car or the truck to move. And if you're driving really fast, so here we've actually sped up quite a lot. Our attention has a lot more energy in it. A little change on the wheel makes for a big change with attention. So this will seem like a small shift, but it actually has a powerful result. So this was entering the stream. Now I want to talk about being in the flow. So you've noticed the stream, right? Jump in. Let yourself, you might say, I was thinking about this earlier, surrender to the flow. Now here's something to know. Surrendering to the flow does not mean following the thoughts or indulging the emotions or worrying about the physical sensations. It just means let them be a flow. You're knowing, your hands are still on the metaphorical wheel, you're still driving down the metaphorical road, right? And you've just, it's like you're completely engaged, and now you're one with the road, right? You're at ease, like you're going at a speed in which there's complete engagement and it's easy to drive, and these things are happening. So inside of your awareness as a meditator, thoughts come and go. They're not a distraction. They're just the scenery. Emotions happen, not a distraction. In fact, maybe they give more energy into right, I'm here with that feeling. It's just flowing by, right? So there's a quality of absorption into the meditation in which you're one with what's happening. And at the same time, what's happening is very ordinary. Like you're just having thoughts. You don't have to have designer thoughts, good thoughts, peaceful thoughts, happy thoughts, special thoughts. You're having whatever thoughts you're having, whatever emotions come up. In fact, it's useful if, as they come up, as the scenery goes by, you let yourself, it's sort of like you see the trees without getting pulled. Like, oh, there's a tree, right? As you're driving. You don't have to like take your eyes off the road, you'd crash, but you can notice, right? You're just one with whatever's happening, right? So there's a quality of absorption and loosely held awareness that produces this state. And what were some of the words that went with it? No separation, flying, enjoyable, full of easeful. Like you're still there's a lot of concentration, energy going on because you're still meditating, but it's with ease. It's not like a strain to meditate. You're in the flow of awareness, and the awareness as it's going by constantly reinforces your attention. It's smooth, expansive, and one more time, I would remind you to, like touch in lightly every once in a while with the body. It's deeply rooted in the experience of just being a human being. Where the journey is taking us in terms of calm abiding is that you can rest with complete attention and relaxation and flowing focus on just being you. I mean, most of us have things we can do better. As one teacher I know says, you're completely perfect and you can use some work, right? So they can both be true, right? So it's not like, oh, I've achieved nirvana or sainthood no, I still have work to do. But at the moment that you're meditating, you could relax completely at ease and in the flow. And that's what stage 8 is about. So lots of words to describe this experience that, all of you, I was really happy had some connection with and an example of. And I hope as we practice in the coming week, it's like, oh, right, I could get into the flow of this, right? So as we practice, we'll do the usual go through 1 through 7 at this point pretty quickly. You can stay at whatever stage you wish to stay at. If you want to stay at 4 or even 1. Or if you sort of think you're still working at 6, finding the ability to sustain the connection with subtle mind, right? This flow is pretty subtle, right? That's why we went to subtle mind. And the knowing sort of opens up to the flow. So I think that's a lot of words about an experience that's very direct. And if I could go back one more time and say that I think the key here is the idea of I'm giving into the flow. I'm not trying to have different thoughts or special feelings. Right? I'm not even watching myself do this. Like here I am flowing, I'm flowing, that'll kill the flow, right? There's just a quality of I'm just doing it. And I'm just in whatever, my attention's here, and whatever is flowing by, that reminds me to be here. Right? So with surrendering to the flow as the pith instruction for stage 8, I'm going to stop the screen share, and I would love to hear what you think. Robert.
So as you were talking about entering the stream and
Mhm.
then being in the flow, I thought of the direct metaphor, which is to, step into the stream and then, lie down in the water.
Right.
And then I thought about the thoughts as fish. You
Right.
can't hold on to, like, you can't grab it. And I mean, maybe you can, but let's assume you can't.
Right.
They just do their thing, and the crabs walk along the bottom of the thing. And
Right.
so that was really helpful to me just to think about it in that context.
Right. And it's something from earlier today, and I believe this was Violain who shared this, and if not, please accept the credit whoever you were. There are things under the surface like rocks or whatever that change the flow, and that's fine. That's what's in your particular stream. We're not trying to change the rocks, although maybe they'll change. That's not necessarily the point. We're just trying to be with the flow and acknowledge the fish and the everything else, the crabs, the rocks. Right? I thought about entering the flow of traffic. So I grew up in Philadelphia and I drove a lot on. So this would be, what is the main highway that goes through Toronto? Is it the 401? This would be the I-95 would be like the 401. And, if you get on there most of the day, it is pretty intense. There are thousands of cars per minute. And you have to like time your entry into the, so if we're staying with the car thing, you have to time your entry into the roadway. And then you're in a flow, and you're going as fast as you want to go, I hope, not being forced to go faster by somebody tailgating you, but also not going so slow as to be dangerous. You find what works for you, right? And then and that was in some places an eight or 10 lane wide highway, right? And there's cars all over the place, and you're in and out of the stream, and there's a flow, right? Sometimes your awareness is like that. And the secret to that kind of driving, the picture we had, Tim, of driving was like one car on a nice country road. But that's not always how it is to be inside of your mind or my mind. Sometimes it's more like entering the 401 or I-95. There's a lot of stuff happening, right? And we don't have to fight with the traffic. We just have to find the flow, right? So we're trying to find the flow. Oh, something I did also want to say about that. There's something about finding the flow. And it's hard to say this without sounding like a promise. So it'll sound like a promise. It connects you to something deeper, right? Like you find the flow, and then there's a depth of what's happening that's available. But let's find the flow first. You might now begin to, this is why I called it entering the stream. Entering the stream, I feel like that guy from Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Enter the stream, find the flow. Very simple instructions. Helena,
Oh, simple instructions are always so
they're the worst.
difficult. Yeah, I'm I'm finding. So so Brian, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference of the when I'm driving down the highway, when I have that metaphor and the thoughts come and you see the signs and everything, you're not paying attention to them. So how is that different from entering and surrendering to the flow, because the thoughts are still always coming? Are the thoughts getting like in the picture that you showed us, is the fire burning less, so the thoughts are not as big as before? Again, I'm just a little
So,
confused about the
yeah,
metaphor.
yeah. So let's just stay with the driving metaphor, right? So let me, this will take me just a second to get this. I'm going to get my little driving movie if I can get it to pull up here. There, it's opening. This is a nice way for me to stall and think of my answer while I'm getting this thing to open. So here we go. Share the driving one, right? So Tim, this was the image we've been using. Hopefully you can see the driving movie. Right?
Yes.
So you're So we've talked about this is like connected to finding the subtle object, and you're not trying to make the trees and the road signs go away, but you're noticing them and you're aware while the driving is happening, you're aware that the car is moving, that you're driving, your hands on the wheel, right? This is your connection to the subtle object. What happens when a lot of people talk about meditation, it's as if they want everything other than the road to disappear. I want my thoughts to go away, or I want them only to be, green trees, no yellow trees, no trees without leaves. I just not get rid of that tree, right? Or I don't, this is like a caution sign ahead. I don't want any caution signs. I just want, what's that one? Oh, that was a no something or other, right? Like no signs, right? So we're not trying to make any of it go away. We're just noticing, right? So this, like the knowing that you're driving while you're driving, or this is a curve. How you'll be in the car is different, right? So there's a subtle knowing that's going on while you're driving.
Hmm.
Entering the stream quality in it, that what we were calling entering the stream is, you begin to have a sense of, as all of this stuff, and I'm sorry to keep playing this movie, but it's the best example I have. You have a sense that, yes, that stuff going by is part of your experience of driving. So if the trees and the signs represent your thoughts and your emotions and your memories, as they come in and out, they appear and disappear like they're going by as you drive. That's just part of the experience. You're not trying to make them go away, but you're also not turning and following the tree, or you'll drive off the road, right? So you're just letting it happen, right? Cruise control was you can just stay there. I'm not going to play the whole thing again for cruise control. Entering the flow is your experience. You begin to realize that you're constantly having thoughts, memories, feelings, physical sensations. Meditation doesn't take you to some extraordinary, calm abiding at least, doesn't take you to some extraordinary place in which you don't have thoughts, feelings, memories, or sensations. You're actually in your body, very present while all of this is happening. And the fact that they're going by and your attention is loosely focused on breathing in, out, and body, right? You can just relax into it and let it deepen. And as they flow by, that's what it is to know. I'm just in this flow of continuously changing dynamic experience of having an awareness. So the reason I went down that whole long production is like many meditators try to not have thoughts, or to only have special thoughts or good thoughts, or right, or to stop thought, right? And we're not trying to do any of that. We're just resting in a very everyday, so ordinary in that sense. Like this is what it's like to be a human being. I constantly am experiencing something, and my awareness is connecting with that experience. And we called that moment of awareness plus experience mind in the first presentation. So it's like moment of mind, and then the next moment of mind, and then the next moment of mind. They're happening thousands, tens of thousands of times a minute.
And
Maybe.
would,
Go ahead.
sorry, and would you say that experience is for you to realize that you are not that?
Well, at this point, it's just to rest in that experience.
Okay.
The reason I'm going there, now we're into some deep philosophical waters. So if you don't want philosophy, you should turn the sound off now. What else are you than that? Like this thing we call I is really just an amalgam, cobbling together of all those moments, right, into me. This is my experience, my experience, my experience, my experience, my experience, and we make that I. But what's really happening is this flow of awareness and experience. And it's constantly changing, right? It's not a thing. It's not like my pen, right? It's not like a solid. This isn't one thing either. If I take it apart, I don't know if I can put it back together. It's from the dollar store. But imagine I took it apart into all of its component pieces and went, well, it's not the top, it's not the bottom, it's not the cartridge, it's not the clicker thing. It's, it's like got all these pieces, right? So, well, I is like that. It's like one thing, and then the next thing, and then the next moment, and then the next moment, and so. But instead of getting involved in the philosophy and the psychology of it, we're just trying to connect to, oh, there's this flow of awareness of this moment of awareness or mind or experience. I've been calling it knowing because I like speaking in simple English, like knowing, 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 and it's got a flow. Interestingly about the flow, if you can just surrender to it, there's a pleasure that goes with it. Even in the worst moments, it feels alive. That's part of the depth, but you have to surrender to the flow. When you want it to just be my happy flow, that's not surrender. That's like a parent who wants you to just be your happy self. Don't be sad, darling. I know that they said, they didn't like you at kindergarten. Or, don't be disappointed. It's like, no, whatever's happening, that's the flow, right? So there's a quality of surrender to it. And that's your driving. So back to the driving metaphor, it doesn't matter. And I was talking earlier today about a building that I hate on the way into town. By the way, I drove past it twice today and I didn't notice. I felt really good about that. I didn't get caught in my flow. It's just another building. Right? So things come and go as you drive by them. Does that speak to your question, Helena?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Somebody else want to jump in? This VLN.
I was actually going to say that Halina probably knew that, when sometimes when you speak and you're coming to make a point, it feels like something is happening and it's almost like the words are being put in our mouth. And I felt that's really being in the flow. And sometimes it's funny, it happened a few times, but I remember that was a few months ago. I was at the ceramic museum and the woman looked at me and she said, I hope you have something to write or record what you just said. And it happened a few times. And I feel something happens in me and something takes over.
Mhm.
That's the best I can say.
Yeah. There's so much. It's interesting if you want to like read things on flow, that would tell you a lot about what we're working with here. It's exactly what you said, and things sort of happen on their own. It's like the words coming to you. Here's something that a lot of people say when they're in the flow. Their experience of time changes. And so you might be sitting, and we've been sitting for 20 minutes, and 20 minutes might flash by. There's no guarantee that the time changes fast. 20 minutes might seem like 20 years. Because you've stepped out of watching yourself, right? You're not like watching the clock, you're just in the flow. And it'll feel like however long it feels. But sometimes you have that experience in it. So there's a surrendering to, I'm just what's happening now, and I hope you can trust that my Apple meditation iWatch timer or whatever will like ding at 20 minutes and I'll sound the bell. I won't have completely surrendered so far that like 3 hours have gone by and one of you has to unmute and go, Brian, I think we're done. I did have that once in a meditation practice. I was at a daton and the timekeeper fell asleep, but they were so good, they looked like they were still awake. And it was like 2 hours it was excruciating. We're like, somebody please go see if they're still alive, because they need to hit the bell so we can get up and walk. So somebody else want to jump in? Okay. Well, it's often the simplest instructions, like surrendering to the flow, are very challenging. And, tomorrow when we pick this up, so we'll be practicing at 8 a.m. and 12 noon Atlantic. So those of you on the Pacific coast, that's 8 a.m. Pacific. And if you're in other time zones like Atlanta, that's 8 a.m. Atlantic is 7 a.m. Eastern, etc. So I'll send the link, and tomorrow might be we'll keep alternating. Like some days I've been guiding through the stages, and others I haven't. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll have chance to explore the flow. And of course, you're welcome to, practice at whatever stage you want to practice at. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And, maybe one last thing, like, this was a course in the 9 stages, and you might find that, you're comfortable at stage 6. Well, then you could regard what we're talking about now as a preview of coming attractions, like about it, and it's a road that you can drive down in the future. So there's no hurry to get to this stage. But if you want to, that's what we'll be exploring tomorrow. So having said that, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much, Brian. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.
Brian.
Good to see you
Thank
again.
you. I'll be on the way to Peggy's Cove tomorrow. I'm being picked up at 7:30.
Ah.
Funny, yeah.
Well, enjoy the drive. It's a beautiful drive.
Enjoy.
Yeah, I know. I said to my friend, that's funny. I talked about you to them the other day and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, cool.
Excellent.
Enjoy
All right.
your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.